Hi, I'm Bart Frischnecht from Lumen Energy. If you're thinking about solar on your roof, you might be asking yourself, how will I make sure that I can actually get on the roof and take care of that roof when there's a solar system installed? This is a great question, and it makes a ton of sense to think about before you go down the path of putting solar on your roof. When you lease your roof, the solar developer will have certain rights, just like any other tenant in your building. They will want to make sure that you're not putting things that are going to shade their panels or disturbing the system that they have in place. At the same time, you as the building owner or landlord have certain rights to access your roof and to take care of the things that need to be taken care of. Maintenance for equipment that's on the roof, regular repairs, all of the things that might be reasons why you would want to be on that roof. But let's dig into a little more detail around how this actually comes out when you have a solar lease. There's typically two scenarios that you will be concerned about when you think about accessing your roof during a solar lease. So the first is regular wear and tear, regular maintenance, or potentially installing some new equipment for a new tenant or something like that. These are scenarios that typically don't disrupt the solar project to a great degree, but they do need to be taken into account. And so depending on how the lease is written, you as the landlord may be responsible for what's called lost energy revenue, or the solar developer may provide a grace period where regular repairs, normal actions are accounted for so that you can get on your roof with notice to the solar developer, and they can remove, shut down, move around some of the system so that you can access the place that needs a repair or whatever needs to be happening with the equipment that's on the roof. In the cases where you're responsible for lost energy revenue and that there's a grace period built in, it's helpful to understand why that is and what that is. So lost energy revenue is a concept that is in place to recognize that the solar developer is leasing your roof because they want to get the income from the solar. And if the solar is not generating electricity, they can't sell it. But in a solar lease, you typically have layers of where that money's coming from. So some of it's coming from incentives from state programs, some of it's coming from selling the electricity directly, and some of it, especially in the early years, is coming from tax credits. And so what you will see is that you will have a certain number of days or a certain percentage of the system or a certain amount of electricity loss that will not count towards you disrupting the system. And then beyond that, then there would be a calculation to take into account those different layers of how the solar developer is making money and where they may have lost money from the roof being down. The grace periods negotiated in these solar leases are typically sufficient for almost all regular roof maintenance and roof repair during a typical year. The second scenario that you want to think about is the scenario where the roof needs to be replaced entirely. And so in this scenario, what we're really thinking about is how can you replace your roof because it needs to be replaced, and at the same time not bear an enormous burden by asking your rooftop tenant, the solar developer, to take everything off the roof and put it back on again. And the things to think about here is if you know that the roof needs to be replaced, you'll want to do that before you put the system on. On the other hand, if you have a new roof, you are not likely to need to worry about replacing the roof during the system. So in those cases where you're putting solar on the roof and the roof is likely need to be replaced during the term of the solar lease, it's important to negotiate that upfront with the solar developer. And there's different ways to manage that. One way is to simply account for the cost that you'll bear when you replace that roof, and that puts you in control of the cost. But commonly we see landlords, building owners, negotiating that the solar developer actually takes the risk and the cost for a one-time roof replacement. And when you build that in up front, you may have a lower lease rate, but you have the comfort that knowing you or the future building owner will not have to worry about bearing that cost when you replace the roof. So to wrap things up, if you are thinking about solar, you should have a lot of confidence that you'll have control of the roof and be able to make the maintenance and repairs that you are concerned about. In addition, there are always provisions to handle emergencies and even the case where the whole roof needs to be replaced. How those situations are paid for will depend on the lease itself. And there's ways to protect yourself when you're negotiating that lease so that you'll have the options that you want at your fingertips depending on how those situations come out. We recommend working with an experienced solar broker to make sure that you've identified the things that are important to your business and get those into the lease so that you are roof worry free during the whole time the solar's on your roof.